Well, today we're going to be picking up a new series, and I've decided to look at the book of James. The book of James is one of my favorite books in the Bible. My personal life verse comes in the book of James. It's James chapter 1, verse 2 and 3. Consider it great joy when you have trials of any kind, because it builds up your endurance, makes you a better, stronger person. I come to love that verse some many years ago when my youngest daughter was born. And so the book of James is one of my favorite books. We're not exactly sure who wrote the book of James. We know the man's name was James. I like to believe it was Jesus Christ's half-brother, being the son of Joseph and Mary. James would be, and Jesus would be his half-brother, because we know that Jesus' father is God. So I like to think that that's who it is. Different scholars think different things, but we believe the book of James was written somewhere around 45 to 50 AD, which would have put him in the right about time to speak and as we look at some of his writings here. And the reason why it was written was to give some direction to the church, and we get that in James chapter 1. James chapter 1 verse 1, it says, James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes dispersed abroad, greetings. So there's the greetings to this epistle, to this letter that was written. Some people call it a general epistle. It was an epistle to all Christians that were scattered out everywhere. Some people even call it an epistle of the second stage, meaning that they were speaking to people that were already saved, and there was some conflict maybe in the church. Or you have to go back and remember that Christianity was something that was very new, and he was speaking to the Jews, and the Jews were still living maybe into some traditional things that were going on, and maybe having some problem, and Christianity was something new for them. So he's speaking to them in the book of James, to the new Christians, the Jews, the converts, and how they can be productive Christians. And that's what I've titled this series, is Productive Faith. How do we have productive faith? So join with us over the next few weeks as we look at James, the book of James, and how to have productive faith. Well, as we pick up in James chapter 1, I want to first look at verses 2 and 3, and we want to look at the facts here. But what keeps us from being productive Christians? What stops us from being productive in the workforce? I believe this: if we're not productive, we're not profitable. If we're not profitable, we're not going to have a job. So we always need to be productive. We need to be productive in the business world. We need to be productive in our families. But we also need to be productive Christians as well, and have productive lives. And so what stops us from being productive? So what are the facts? Well, as we look at this, and we look at verse 2 and 3, it says this: Consider it great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let the endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and completely and lacking nothing. What stops us from being mature Christians? The fact is that we have trials and temptations. Trials and temptations. Every day we face those trials and temptations. So what is the meaning of these trials? When it says, consider it great joy when you have trials, what is that? What is the meaning of that? Well, if you go back, and I can't pronounce the Greek word for that, but what it means is to test, to try, to prove. Nobody said that the Christian life, well, I guess there are people that have said that the Christian life is going to be easy, but when they're telling you that, they're telling you a lie. The Christian life is not going to be easy. If you're watching this video and you just got saved, I can promise you that one of the things that's already happened to you, that Satan is already attacking you. He's telling you you're not worthy of this Christian walk that you have. You may even have family members that tell you that. You may be saved and you got saved because you were broken about a financial crisis. There may be a crisis in your family as well. And you got saved, and guess what? You're still in a financial crisis. Your family is still maybe in a crisis. So just because you got saved does not mean you're not gonna face trials and temptations. So that's what he's saying here. But so why? What is the purpose of that? The purpose of these is it benefits us. It benefits us. It makes us stronger people. And understand this, that these trials and temptations are permitted by God. If you go back and look at the Job, one of the oldest books in the Bible, when Satan attacked Job, he was permitted to attack Job by God himself. So God allows these trials, these problems to crop up in our lives, and he allows those so we can see him closer. And as we look at some of these verses, and as we look at the whole book of James, we'll understand, or hopefully we'll understand a little bit more about what's the benefit, what's the purpose of this, and we'll see that. But as we face these trials and temptations, we should have a proper attitude, and this proper attitude is joy. Joy. Now, when we read this, he says, consider it great joy. Now, when he says consider it, this not mean, well, it's an option. You can consider it or you can not consider it. No, he doesn't say not consider it. He's telling us that when we face trials and temptations, we are to consider it. We are to know, and we are supposed to have the proper attitude of a joyful attitude of everything that happens. And that is so hard to do. I was talking with a young man just today, and actually, I talk to a lot of people at work, but I talked with a young man this morning and talked with another older gentleman this afternoon at work, and just having to vent. I just need to get this off my chest. I just need to vent. And I think it's a good thing to vent to the proper people. And you vent and you get it off your chest. But one thing when you vent, when you get through venting, a helpful thing to do is when you get through venting, then consider the joy. Look at the joy that you have being able to work at where you're at. Look at the joy and the blessings that God has given you. It's not helpful to go around complaining all the time. It's not helpful to just vent and let your frustrations out, when sometimes we just need to sit back and we need to consider it great joy. That is a command. That is what God tells us to do in His Word here. So the first point was the facts of the temptation. We see that the meaning of the word temptation and trials, the purpose is so we can be stronger, better people. But so we see the attitude which we must take, which is a joyful attitude. The second point that I want us to look at is the results. The results, and that's verse 4. Verse 4, and I read this a while ago, but I'll read it again. And let the endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature, complete, and lacking nothing. Mature, complete, and lacking nothing. When we consider it joy, when we go through these trials and temptations, they make us more perfect. They make us more complete. Now, it doesn't mean that it makes us perfect human beings. We don't want to make sure that we want to make sure here that we don't say, well, we make us we're self-righteous. That's not what it is telling us at all. But God is using it, and He is molding us. And as a Christian, we should become more like Jesus. That's called sanctification. That's a part of sanctification as we become more like Jesus. And we will never be like Jesus until we are truly, finally when we're sanctified at the end of that sanctification, and we're in heaven with Him, we will be like Him. We won't look like Him, but we will be like Jesus then. So this is all of this purification process, sanctification process, I guess you could say, making us more mature. It makes us more perfect, but it also makes us stronger. I think about a child, and I have in fact, I have a picture of him here, right back here in the back of Patton. And Patton is now a little over 2 years old, and he's starting to run outside. And every time he runs, I'll cringe because I think he's going to trip and fall and scratch his knees. Well, he will trip and fall, and he will scratch his knees. But as he becomes stronger, and as he learns how to take those steps without tripping and falling, then he becomes stronger. He becomes more mature. And by having those mistakes in life, he will grow stronger. It eliminates weaknesses. It eliminates flaws, defects, shortcomings in our life. It just makes us a better person if we have the right attitude, and that right attitude is joyful. But not only does it help us become perfect and complete, not only does it help us become a stronger person, it also allows us to show our victories, our conquers, how we can conquer things in our life. We need to put things in front of God that we need to put mountains in front of God, not molehills in front of God. And every day by day, you and I have trials and temptations we have every day. But every day as we work through those, He's molding us like clay. And we are becoming more and more and more like Him, and we are overcoming our temptations. We are learning how to deal with those temptations. We're overcoming our trials, and we're learning how to attack these temptations, the things that when I was tempted when I was younger. I'm not tempted by those anymore. Now I have greater temptations, and because I conquered those small temptations, now we can conquer the larger temptations. So we see that the results of the trials and temptations. But lastly, the third thing I want us to see is the way to overcome these temptations. Look with me in verse 5. Verse 5, how do we overcome these temptations? And it's a very simple three-letter word, ask. Ask. Now, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God. We have to be wise to overcome these things. We can know that if we drink alcohol, this is going to happen. If we drink and drive, this could happen. We know that if we take drugs, this is going to happen. We know that if we have sex outside of marriage, this could happen. We know those things, but a wise person is the one that stays away from those things and is not tempted or doesn't give in to temptation. So we have to ask for wisdom. How do we deal with this? And what he just says right here, he says, just ask it. Ask it. So when we ask for wisdom, you say, well, okay, I can ask Him, but how am I going to get it? How am I going to receive it? Well, one thing that we see here, that He gives it liberally. He gives it all generously. He gives wisdom liberally, and He says, and He does it ungrudgingly. He gives us, and He doesn't scold us when He gives us this wisdom. So we need to ask. We need to ask God for wisdom. But then when we ask God for wisdom, we need to have this faith that is an unwavering faith. Look with me in verse 6. Verse 6, but let him ask in faith without doubting. We have to have faith that God is going to do what God promised that He would do, and we're going to see Him do that. And it says unwavering faith, and He actually gives us an illustration of that. For the doubter is like the surging sea, driven and tossed by the wind. Right now, today, a hurricane just hit the Alabama-Florida line. Just a Hurricane Sally, I think is the name. And I was watching the Weather Channel a while ago, and the waves just beating and going back and forth and tossing and turning. And you can't use that. Use the ocean. You can't go to the beach when the waves are beating and crashing like that. It's very dangerous. And that's what he's saying here. It's like the waves being tossed about. He gives an illustration of wavering faith. But he also tells us that wavering faith also receives nothing. The person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. If you have a wavering faith, you need to understand this. You're not going to receive anything from the Lord. He's not going to be able to give it to you because you don't have the faith. We need to have the faith to move mountains. And the faith to move mountains can be just as small as a mustard seed. But not only do we, wavering faith receives nothing, wavering faith shows instability in all things. Look with me in verse 8. Being double-minded and unstable in all of his ways. If you have unwavering faith, if you have wavering faith, you are double-minded. You can't focus on the things that you need to focus on. You're not relying on God, and it's actually a sign of an immature person. You want to be a mature person. You want to be productive in your life and productive in your faith. And every Christian should be productive in their faith. And we see that if we're productive in the faith by the fruits of our labors. The fruits of our labors. So is your life being very fruitful right now? Let me ask you, are you being very fruitful for God? You can say, well, yeah, I got money in my checking account. My wife's happy. My kids are happy. We don't have any problems at school like that. But I'm not asking if your personal life is that way, or your family life that way, or your secular life that way. I'm asking to be of your Christian walk. Is your Christian walk very productive right now? It may be that restlessness that you have inside of your heart and saying, it's not being very productive. What can I do to make it more productive? God's Word says right here, we just need to ask. We need to ask for that wisdom. After we ask for that wisdom, He's going to give it to us. But let me tell you the next step. You need to be obedient. Be obedient in His walk. Be obedient in His calling to whatever He's called you to do. I don't know what He's called you to do, but God knows. God has a plan. God has a purpose for you. And if you'll listen to Him, listen to Him closely. If you remove the sin in your life, ask for forgiveness of the sins. Remove that sin. He's faithful to forgive us. Remove that sin. Listen to Him. Read His Word. His Word. This is God speaking to us when we read His Word. If you'll pray, if you'll ask Him, if you'll seek advice from a pastor, from a deacon, from a chaplain, somebody that's spiritually more mature than you are, if you'll confide in a friend, a true friend that'll give you advice and won't give you bad advice, doesn't have a dog in the fight, I like to say, and whatever you do, but they love you, they truly love you. And if you'll talk to your spouse, your husband, your wife, and if you're not married, you talk to your parents, because they love you, your spouse loves you, and they see things completely different than what you and I see. And then I promise you, there'll be a peace that passes all understanding, that you can then be a productive Christian to be what God would have you to be. But first you got to take that step. You got to take that first step and step out there in obedience and in faith. And God will love you. He won't let you fail. He'll wrap His arms around you, and it'll be amazing to see God's hand work. So I hope you gathered something from this today, and we'll be, over the next few weeks, we'll be going through the book of James. It's a great book. I just ask that you just take a little time and spend with us, and always keep us in your prayers. And as always, I love you and I thank you. And at the end of this video, my contact information will be on there. And as always, contact me at any time with any prayer request or any questions you may have. So God bless, and I love you.